Today I'm going to show you how to make sweet and sour coleslaw. Coleslaw, especially if bought from a supermarket, can often be a soggy, dreary affair, but if you're prepared to put a little bit of effort into making it, it can be absolutely scrumptious. First up, as always, the ingredients. We're going to use 400 grams of shredded cabbage, 100 grams of carrots, also shredded, 500 grams of mixed onions, which we'll chop up in a minute, and 100 grams of dried apricots and 100 grams of raisins. This will make enough coleslaw to fill the 1.1 litre Tupperware box you can see to the right of the ingredients. Just for the record, the cabbage was shredded using this particular medieval torture device. I don't particularly like it, I don't enjoy using it, but it does do the job. Just be very careful when you're using it not to end up cutting your fingers, otherwise you'll have some interesting colouring in your coleslaw. Ever so slightly more high-tech, we used one of these to shred up the carrots. The first order of business is to do something about the hardness of the cabbage, and we're going to do that using salt. The inside of the cabbage contains lots of small cells, all of which contain water, and we're going to use the salt to draw the water out, making the cabbage more crispy and crunchy and not as hard. This is called osmosis. Put 2 heaped tablespoons of salt on your cabbage. Don't worry, this is all going to be washed out. This is only used to remove the water and to make the cabbage more crunchy. Now, using your hands, toss the cabbage like you would toss a salad. What you're trying to do is to get as much salt evenly mixed in with the cabbage as possible. At this point, you'll want to put the cabbage to one side whilst the salt does its work. This can take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how hard the cabbage is when you started. This cabbage is quite fresh and also quite crunchy, so I'm going to leave it sort of 12 to 15 minutes. I've gone for a 50-50 mix of sweet red onions and your common or garden variety. Whilst you're waiting for your cabbage, you want to wash, skin and finely chop these onions. As a rule of thumb, I would say this is about the size the onion pieces should be. The other rule of thumb, of course, is to keep your thumb out of the way of the knife. Now, if you're not a fan of onions, you can always tone it back a little bit. Depending on who's going to be eating it, I've used anywhere from 200 grams to the full 500 grams of onions. So, going back to our cabbage now. As you can see, it's looking a little bit lackluster now, but don't worry, it's still going to taste nice and crunchy when we're finished. The most important thing to do now is to wash off all of that salt, and to do that I transfer it into a colander. You'll want to agitate the cabbage under running water for several minutes to make sure you get as much of the salt out as possible, otherwise all you're ending up doing is eating salty cabbage. Try and remove as much water as you can before transferring it ready to dry. We're now trying to get rid of the excess water. Now I've done it by putting it on some kitchen towels. These are material rather than paper, so they're nice and absorbent as well as being quite strong. Obviously use whatever you have to hand. I lay another 2 sheets on top of the cabbage and then gently place a towel on top. The one thing you don't want to do is to apply too much pressure to the cabbage. Now that our cabbage is drying, we can turn our attention to the dried fruit. This is what's going to add the sweet to our sweet and sour. As a general rule, you'll want to cut the apricots as small as you can get them. What you're trying to do is to allow the juices from the apricots to mix in with the mayonnaise into the salad. If you make the pieces too big, not only will you end up eating big pieces of apricot, but also the juices won't merge as well. And finally, the raisins. There's nothing particularly technical about this. I tend to just put them on the chopping board and hack at them with a nice big chopping knife until they look like they're in several pieces each. The raisins really are going to give you texture and a little bit of sweetness. Now that all of our ingredients are ready, it's time to start mixing. First, I put the dried cabbage into a large mixing bowl. In my experience, mixing the mayonnaise can be quite a messy business, so I've deliberately gone for a bowl that's much bigger than I originally held the cabbage in. Next I add in the onion and then the carrot At this stage, I hand mix the ingredients together. In my experience, it's easier to mix several ingredients together than to mix all of the ingredients together. You're more guaranteed to get an even distribution. Now we can add our finely chopped apricots and lastly the raisins. Now we mix the ingredients again, but this time I've used a spoon. The reason for this is, if you try and hand mix it now, all of the dried fruit will stick to your fingers. Now we can add some mayonnaise. It's always better to put too little mayonnaise in and then think, I could do with some more, and add extra. It's worth mentioning, however, you don't want to skimp on the mayonnaise, otherwise you won't get the even distribution of sweet and sour that makes this particular recipe work. That looks about right. Mayonnaise is a cheap and readily available commodity here, so I've just bought mine from the local supermarket. If, however, you feel comfortable making your own mayonnaise, then that does allow you to fine-tune the flavour by changing the amount and type of vinegar that you put in when you make it. And there it is finished. You'll want to get it nice and tightly packed into the box, as this helps the flavours to mix. And there we have it, the perfect sweet and sour salad. All you need now is a nice glass of Rioja and a nice sunny, warm evening to enjoy it by. Thank you for watching this video, and as always, any comments will be gratefully received.